Hi, this is Neil Clements, and this is The Real Deal with Neil. Today we're going to be talking about real estate licensing. Should you get licensed? Should you not as a real estate investor? And I'm going to tell you why that for me, and I earn 90% of my income from investing in real estate, not brokering it, why I personally choose to keep a real estate license and how it's beneficial to my business, but also some disadvantages that also make it difficult to do my business. And so anyways, let's get to it. So let's start with advantages. One of the biggest advantages as a licensed realtor that I have, especially in a non-disclosure state like Texas, is that I have access to comps. So if you're not aware, there are states throughout our nation that don't have the ability to have sold data be public. And so that means whenever you're running comps in a non-disclosure state, you're gonna see actives. So like if you go on Zillow or Trulia, Redfin or Realtor.com, wherever you get your comps from, it's going to show properties sold. It's going to show the last asking price that they had when they sold, but it's not going to actually show what they sold for. And this is really important because the only true way to be able to run comparables as far as like a comp-based approach whenever you're evaluating properties is to know what properties sold for. And so that is a huge advantage to me because instead of whenever we make our offers for the properties that we buy in Texas, instead of having to go outsource our data, go find a broker to give us the data, or just have to estimate based upon asking prices, and I'm sure there are ways to do that, we can actually take sold comps in an area, we can use that in our mailers, we can use that in our offers, and we can make sure that we're giving the best offers possible. And then also whenever we buy properties to sell them, we can make sure that we're pricing them correctly based upon sold data. So it is a huge value. Now, maybe it's a little bit less value in places that are, disclosure states where you can see all this data publicly. But here in Texas, gosh, it is a huge, huge value to be licensed, to be able to see the MLS data. The second thing is commissions. And so whenever we go out and buy properties, a lot of times we are still taking commission on the buy, or at least we're using that as a negotiation strategy. So what I mean by that is, we'll give our, all cash offer. That's going to be probably our lowest amount. We'll talk to them maybe about a seller financed offer where we can pay more, and especially if we get lower interest or lower down payment, we have less risk in the deal. But throughout the course of negotiation, a lot of times it ends up where they're at a number that's just a little bit too far away for us to get to. And so that's when we can offer to take some real estate commission in lieu of that. And believe it or not, we find that a lot of sellers are so particular about getting a number. I'm not sure if it's to tell their friends, I'm not sure if it's to be able to say they sold it for that amount or whatever it is, but they just want a clean and cut number. Instead of being at, say, like, 285, 290, they want to be at 300, and say that 10 to 15,000 is a make or break for us. Well, we offer to give them the 300,000. We just offer to take that other 10 to 15,000 in commission. And so there are a lot of times that gets us over the edge. If we're not doing that off market, that's an example there, then we can move to an on market example, which I would say probably a quarter of our deals come from on MLS, even our land deals. And so with those land deals, I'm able to represent myself as the real estate agent. We already know that in most circumstances, the sellers and the seller's agents are offering commission. And with that commission amount, I get to pay myself to buy properties. And especially if it's like a seller finance deal with all, zero down or low down, there's a lot of times that I can get a refund at closing, or essentially come to the table with a little bit of money and then get refunded whenever I get paid. So that's huge because every single time we buy a property on MLS, we can compare ourselves. In the same regard on commission, whenever we are selling a property, whenever we're listing a property that we own, that's a huge value add as well. When you're doing as many deals as we're doing, 50 plus, 100 plus a year, just depending on the year for us as far as investment side, and that's the number of transactions, the commissions start to add up very large. Our average sales price for our properties is $250,000 plus, and you start to put that on, 50 different transactions of $250,000. You multiply that by an average commission rate anywhere from say 2 to 3%, depending on the property and price. And you start to be talking about some serious numbers. And in fact, there was a time just in the past few months or past year when I was reevaluating whether it's worth it for me to be licensed or not, because I have a whole team behind me that's also licensed, that listing agents, buyer's agents, you name it. And so I was evaluating whether it's beneficial for me to be licensed. And I came up with the answer was still yes. And one of the primary reasons was for that fact of we're selling so many properties. I'm still the listing agent on our properties. And for me to like bring somebody on to like a salaried position, maybe hire somebody, or to do an external real estate agent was going to be a multi six-figure cost between what I could do myself versus hiring somebody. And so for me, with the business that we run and the volume that we run it at, it is still hugely beneficial for me to have that cost savings, to not have to pay somebody commission to sell our properties. Another huge benefit for us is information about the market. And so whenever we, not only for our properties that we sell, but also for the people that we sell on behalf of, the client side that we have, and this is for me and all the other agents on the team, every time we get a new listing, we're diving into that area of the market. Maybe it's, a new city that we haven't been to yet or sold in yet. Maybe it's something 30 minutes from where we have before. And every state, every county, every city, it seems like every street, every neighborhood, every house has its own marketing dynamic, which is why it's so hard, especially with houses specifically. It's extremely hard to give like an estimated value for a house. You can be within 5 to 10% pretty accurately, but to actually get it down to the most probable selling price is really, really hard. And even all the big algorithms have super big trouble with it because it is so specific. Land, as you get into big acreage, a little bit easier to go on price per acre, but even small land like infill lots can get kind of challenging to do those automated valuations. And the reason that that's a huge advantage is because what we get to see whenever we're brokering real estate is we get to take listings, we get to work with buyers, and we get to see where multiple offers are potentially coming from, right? And so like if we know that a property has multiple offers, we ask ourselves, why? Why did that happen? And then we can go back and reevaluate. We can pivot our strategy on our investing side and also our brokering side to capitalize more on those properties and know what to do next time. We can also see on the inverse of that, what properties are we pricing based upon comps, which actually need to be a little bit more demand-based priced, which need to be ahead of the market, not essentially at where the market was, because the market moves every single day. And so for us, we get to spot market trends, market activities, months, even a year before the news media starts to talk about everything that's going on. I mean, even for instance, especially in the land game right now, this is middle of 2025 when I'm recording this, it is down. It's down in a big way. Seth and I just did a podcast on land market update for, the middle of 2025. And a lot of real estate investors were resonating with how difficult it is right now to sell properties, especially big land. And we're having the same thing happen in our investing business. It's happening in our brokering business. But I'll tell you, like, even from the time Seth and I started doing these podcasts about the land market update, which was late 2024, I had already started seeing in our business and I had already started predicting like October, maybe even before October 2024, that this was going to be really, really hard throughout the rest of the year and into 25. And so how did I know that whenever nobody else was really saying it? Well, we could see the leading indicators. We could see our pricing going down. We kind of saw the same thing in June of 2022. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, the news starts talking about recessionary fears and prices going down and the real estate market crashing. And so we got to saw that not only because of our real estate investing business, we also got to see it because of our brokerage side business. And we can do so much more volume as a brokerage as far as the amount of transactions we can do than we can actually physically take down on the real estate investing end. So it's a huge feedback loop is the way that I see it. We take listings, we also have properties that we invest in personally, and it's a feedback loop of coming together to have market insights into what's going on in land, housing, commercial. And then that way we can make the best informed decisions on what kind of opportunities we need to be investing and putting our personal capital into right now. In fact, the way that I learned how to invest is I was working with investors who were coming and buying single family houses and even doing flips. And I saw in those opportunities, they were like buy for 100 and maybe sell for like 150, 175 after some renovations. And, I would go out and find these properties. I get 3% commission, 3,000 off 100,000. And the flipper would go out or the rental property investor would build $20, $30, $40,000 of equity in the property. And eventually after doing this a handful of times, I got smart and I said, you know what, like what's the difference between them and me? And it wasn't much. It was just capital and risk tolerance. And so from then on out, I decided, okay, like I've seen it happen a few times. I've seen it be brokered. And so I know what to do here. So all that I have to do is go out and mimic what's going on here and then I can put this together myself. And the other thing that happened there was I had the ability to see, especially in the land side, the way that I made the pivot from flipping houses into flipping land, and that being my primary income activity now, is I actually started brokering land several years ago, 2020, maybe even 2019. And because of that, I saw what worked. I saw subdividing of land. I had buyers looking for smaller plots, say 1 acre unrestricted for mobile homes. And I saw how hard it was to actually find land for them. And I saw how hard it was to buy like a 10-acre tract of land that people were looking for that had minimal deed restrictions. And so I started seeing all these market incongruencies that were happening in my local market in DFW and even all the way out to Northeast Texas. And because of that, that made me so much better of an investor because I already saw the demand first. And all that I was I was going out to buy properties to fulfill that demand. And that's how it happened with, house flipping. I was just fulfilling demand, right? I was just fulfilling demand on land subdividing, and that continues to this day. And our brokerage is ever evolving to where we're taking on new and bigger opportunities, moving into commercial, moving into big land, 100+ acres, 2, 3, 4, $5 million properties. And so we're starting to expand our brokerage. There's kind of a key theme here is that as we've expanded our brokerage activity and as we've expanded our learnings and we see what's hot, we see what's working, well, we just bolt on our real estate investing business right behind it. And then we go to what's working. We already know that there's demand because we've tested it in a low risk environment like brokering. And then we just put capital toward it. We put risk toward it. And then we come out on the other end and benefiting from it. And the crazy thing is, like I said in the intro of this video, 90% or more of my income comes from real estate investing. So it's like, why do I continue to broker? Why do I continue to hold my license? Well, like everything that I just mentioned is huge. Plus also, like if we can't buy a property, there's so many people that we haven't been able to buy properties for because our properties are so far away in price. We just list it for them. We just sell it for them. Not even to mention the opportunity, if I know of anybody or any investor comes to me or whoever it is and needs a good real estate agent, like I've got a huge network with realtors all across the nation to where if somebody comes and says, hey, I'm buying land, I'm buying property, I want a commercial building, I want a real estate investment, and they want it in a specific area, well, I just send a referral back and I can make 1/3 to 1/4 of that commission back. And just for sending out that referral and making that relationship. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a huge blessing to have a real estate license. That's why I choose to keep it. And there's so many different income generating vehicles that can be done by somebody who is a broker and an investor that would be a little bit difficult for those who don't have a broker license and who don't have that day-to-day market knowledge of what's going on. Now, the converse of that, I would say that if you're running a big enough real estate investing business, well, then you're going to have a lot of those insights. You're going to have a lot of the same benefits. The difference is going to be whether or not you can take commission, whether or not you can send referrals, and whether or not you can actually get compensated in the licensing end, because you probably won't be able to do that. But yeah, I would just say to wrap up advantages, like we just have the huge opportunity. We're super blessed to be able to serve a lot of different people in a lot of different stages of their investing career, from their first house to their 5th to their 10th to their 100th. And that can be land, commercial, houses. And this is in no way a commercial for our brokerage. I'm just saying that we have been super, super blessed to be able to step forward in brokerage and then bolt on real estate investing behind it. And I would highly, highly encourage you to get a license for that specific reason, is to be able to have the advantages that we have as brokers. Okay, let's flip it to the other end. Disadvantages. So disadvantages is in Texas specifically, as a licensed real estate agent, if you're dealing with a property type that has a promulgated form from the state of Texas, then you have to use that form. And so this affects our mailing specifically. We can't necessarily send out 1-page, 2-page blind offers. If we do, we have to just edit it to be specifically, stated that it's not an actual offer, you don't sign it, we'll follow it up, or it's letter of intent, or whatever you want to call it. In addition to that, we also have to use the promulgated forms. And so if we want to put in any kind of custom language, we got to put that in special provisions. We got to add an exhibit. We got to have an attorney draw something up. So you would think that promulgated forms would be easier, but it also is just a little bit more complicated than using like a 1 or 2 pager and then going ahead and getting it signed. And so that is a little bit difficult, but it's not the end of the world. What is more difficult than that, though, is we have to give additional legal disclosures. We have additional legal requirements as a realtor. We have additional documents that are needed, especially regarding representation, liability, the market values of the property, Are we working for them? Are we working for us? Are we their realtor? Or are we just a buyer? And so we have to clarify all of that. And so I guess the only difficult part is when you put that together with having these promulgated forms. If most investors listening to this are buying land or buying property using a 1 or 2 page contract, our typical contract or promulgated form just is like 10 pages already, the 104 contract or the unapproved land contract. Then you add on like some kind of brokerage disclosure, then you add on any exhibits. And so at times, unfortunately, we've just overwhelmed people with the amount of paperwork, essentially 15 pages of paperwork to be able to do an offer. Majority of the people that we send out offers to want to consult an attorney, which is great, good for them. And the contract even advises them to do so. But it's almost so much language and it's so much forms that it becomes more difficult for them to understand than if we just had like a simple 1 or 2 pager outlining the basic terms and then taking that to the title company. Also, you start to get in complication with like E&O insurance. So you start thinking about, and your brokerage especially starts thinking about, what if somebody was to ever come and sue you and, claim that you did represent them or claim that, I don't know, you took advantage of them or, whatever somebody would try to say about you as a real estate investor versus a realtor. And so you've got to be really careful with that, how you represent yourself, the disclosures that you get signed, what you tell people. You got to be careful about fiduciary duty, who is your fiduciary duty to in these situations. And you've also got to have, insurance, your brokerage does. And so there's a lot of brokerages who are very uncomfortable with people doing investing. Whether that's wholesaling, double closings, taking title, like actually purchasing and flipping, buying rentals, etc. And E&O can get expensive for those purposes and can also have additional guidelines. So we got to watch that. And additionally, the fees add up quickly. Just to keep a license active. And so just to be a realtor at a brokerage and have a monthly fee or an annual fee, just have your license active, your MLS, to have a key box for showing, some basic equipment like signs, lock boxes, etc. You're talking running $3,000 to $5,000 a year just right off the rip, just for nothing. Then you've got your continuing education that you have to keep up. You've got all of your licensing if you want to join multiple MLS boards so that you can have MLS in multiple parts of areas. The fees and the licensing just get a little excessive pretty darn quickly. And that doesn't even include any kind of brokerage fees as far as commission splits when you do get paid commission. Plus, if you're not representing any clients, are they going to let you, is your brokerage going to essentially let you not take any commission on your own deals? Are they going to get essentially no commission from you for the year? Well, they're probably not. And so I would just say that if you're not doing a lot of transactions where you're able to save the money from you selling with an agent, or you're able to essentially, get commission when you're buying properties, or if you're not working with a lot of other outside clients who are not yourself, it's going to be really hard for a real estate license to be worth it for you. And so I guess my final advice to you as I wrap up all this, as we review the advantages and the disadvantages, is that if you're already licensed like I am, I think it makes a huge advantage for you to keep your license, to work with outside clients, also to work with yourself, to have that market knowledge and have that business. And especially for a lot of people, that fallback, that plan B, just in case investing doesn't work out, to keep your license. I think that's huge. But I would say that if you don't have your real estate license, and if you don't see some of the advantages that I talked about today being hugely beneficiary to you, then just don't do it. There are plenty of people who own very sizable real estate investing companies who are not licensed. So it's definitely not a requirement. Let's just say that. Success is not precipitated on you having a real estate agent license when you're a real estate investor. However, if you're a newbie and you're looking to get the fundamentals, there's almost no better way to get the fundamentals of how to be a real estate investor than to be an agent first, to broker for other people in a low risk environment, and for you to figure out how to sell properties, what makes a property sell, how to do it quickly. That's going to be hugely valuable to you, as it has been for me in your investing career. And so, yeah, that's what I'd say. If you're not already licensed, and if you don't think the advantages I talked about today are big enough reason, then don't do it. But anyways, guys, I hope that helped. That's why I keep my license. Huge advantages, also some disadvantages. If y'all ever need anything, reach out. Talk to you soon.